Good morning, and welcome to our Satsang here in Bangalore. And we'll start now with a fire ceremony.
Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sagandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshiyamamritat Swaha. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sagandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshiyamamritat Swaha. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sagandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshiyamamritat Swaha. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sagandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshiyamamritat Swaha. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sagandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshiyamamritat Swaha. Om Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sagandim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshiyamamritat Swaha. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sagandim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshiyamamritat Swaha.
Om Swaha. Om Swaha. Om Swaha. And let's pray. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Mary Mahashaya, Swami Shri Jaswarji, beloved Guru, Brahmansya Banamaji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we humbly bow to you all. Divine Mother, we deeply thank you for your presence in our lives. Bless us that more and more we act as your humble instruments, sharing your light, your healing, your love and joy with all souls. Om Shanti. And now we'll have some music and some chanting followed by meditation.
Sing the moon rays on the rain, sing that love for in day. Every breathing, every call, as it's ending in song. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. It's on hand, of its spirit, not a blooming to the night. Without silence, what is song? Without light, where is God? Where is love, what is hope? Towards my land of God. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Let it show silent song, earth and heaven unite. Morning after, evening tears, snow and blossoms of May. Dharma singing in the night, to the change of praise. Nightingale, nightingale,
Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Spirit, Om Spirit, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Jesus, Om Jesus, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om. Om Master, Om Master, Om.
Now, in preparation for meditation, let's inhale, tense, and vibrate our bodies. Throw the breath out. And again, inhale. Tense and vibrate. Throw the breath out. And one last time. And throw the breath out. Now let's go deep right away, offering natural love of the heart, awaken through chanting, up to the point between the eyebrows, calling to God and Guru and the great ones there. Reveal thyself, reveal thyself. Feeling their response in our hearts. We'll meditate now for about 10 minutes.
speak. No speak. हेडफोन उठा लिया है वीडियो नहीं चल रहा है यार
Well, good morning once again. And this reading is from the Essence of Self-Realization by Paramahansa Yogananda, drawn from the chapter on working out karma. If I had no desires, asked a congregation member, wouldn't I lose all motivation and become a sort of automaton? Many people imagine, so Yogananda replied. They think they'd have no further interest in life. But that isn't what happens at all. Rather, you would find life to be infinitely more interesting. Consider the negative aspects of desire. It keeps you forever fearful. What if this happens, you think? Or what if that doesn't happen? You live in a state of anxiety for the future or of regret for the past. Non-attachment, on the other hand, helps you to live perpetually in a state of inner freedom and happiness. When you can be happy in the present, then you have God. Desirelessness doesn't rob you of motivation. Far from it. The more you live in God, the deeper the joy you experience in serving Him. And from Whispers from Eternity, again by Paramahansa Yogananda, entitled, I will never again turn my gaze from Thee. I take this sacred vow. Never will I lower my love's gaze below the eyebrow horizon of my constant thoughts of Thee. Never will I turn my uplifted inner sight away from thee. Never will I let my mind dwell on anything that reminds me not of thee. I will disdain the nightmare of ignorant behavior. I will court all dreams of noble achievement, those of love, kindness, and understanding, for they are thy dreams. Though I dream many dreams, wakefully, I will ever think of thee. In the sacred fire of constant remembrance, kept ever alight on my soul's altar, I will ever behold thy presence with the watchful eyes of devotional love. Thy grace has shown me that the dualities of health and sickness, love and death, joy and sorrow are but passing fantasies. I am finished with those eternally self-canceling delusions. I am persuaded at last that there is but one abiding reality, thy eternal, ever conscious, ever new, ever thrilling, infinite bliss. When Swami was there in San Francisco in the early years, this was in the 60s, he was teaching a class every night and then going up to the seclusion retreat, about 3.5 hours from San Francisco, and teaching the weekends. And then he would go repeat that again down to the city because he was paying really single-handedly for the land there at the seclusion retreat, our original property of 72 acres, which he founded in 67, 68. All of the buildings, it was an enormous project. Well, he had gotten the land originally with 3 other parties. And they began to get concerned because they knew that Swami Kriyananda was interested in starting community. And they were thinking that he was going to build a big city up there. And so one of the parties that was away at the time in Japan said, don't do anything until I get back, and then we'll all get together, all 4 of us, and discuss your plans. Well, Swami couldn't wait because people, though originally he thought of the seclusion property as a place for his own seclusion, word got out, and so people started coming, and so with that, then he built a retreat and so forth, because again, it was always his deepest desire to find God and to share God. So I don't think he was really surprised when his dream of having a place of seclusion turned out to be the retreat. And very soon after, the first World Brotherhood colonies, a fulfillment of Master's dream. And so in 1969, God stepped in, and it's a beautiful story of how the property at Ananda Village was purchased. He used to stop at Dr. Reynolds' house, a friend of his, after his classes in San Francisco. And Dr. Reynolds, as it turned out, had a friend who was a realtor. And the realtor, this was in 1969, and the realtor was very excited and said to them both that he now had the joy of seeing this property that was a fantastic land deal. He had never seen anything like it. He was so excited, and he knew that these parcels would be selling like hotcakes, as we say in the States. And so Swami Kriyananda began to be interested. He said, well, where is this land? And he said, well, it's, a couple of hours from San Francisco. And so Swami said, well, do you have a map? I'd like to see where it is. And so as it turned out, it was 6 miles from the original property at the seclusion retreat. So Swami was very enthusiastic and said, well, I would love to see it. And the man said, would you like to see it now? He said, absolutely. And so they drove up to see the property, and Swami was entranced. He just said it was the most beautiful property he had ever seen. And so he said to the sales agent, he said, well, I'd like this parcel, about 40 acres, and this parcel, and that parcel. Pretty soon it was 6 parcels amounting to over 200 acres. Well, what perhaps the realtor didn't know initially was that Swami didn't have any money. He had spent all his money developing the seclusion retreat. And so the realtor said, you know something, I have many people that will be coming into the office Monday morning, and they're going to want this property. So if you want it yourself, I'll hold it over the weekend. But you're going to have to come up with a down payment of $13,500. Now, as Swami described, that was a lot of money back then in the late 60s. But he got on the phone and called a number of his friends, and then was able to call the realtor, and the realtor came into the realtor, his place of realty there late Sunday night, took all of the parcels that Swami had asked for off the board. And when people came in Monday, they were really disappointed, but that was how Ananda was formed. And also fascinating is that the land had been in the hands of a family for over 100 years. And the only reason that the man was selling the property was that he had terminal cancer. And so that, of course, was very sad. And so the miracle of the story is that when we purchased the property, the man was miraculously cured. And I can't help but think that Yogananda, so enthusiastic about World Brotherhood colonies, talking about them so often, especially towards the end of his life. And Swami, of course, picked up on that dream and vowed that he would do everything to make that a reality. God blessed this man, and he was cured of this terminal disease. Well, I came in 1970, just a little less than after we had purchased the farm, as we called it, Ananda Village. And Swami had moved up to the seclusion retreat where he had a small cabin a week before, a week after I came in May of 70. And so it was, for me, of course, just a dream. I felt that I had been dropped in heaven. Well, what was our complete shock when 6 weeks later, early July, the temple burned down. And it was just an extraordinary blow for all of us, but especially Swami, because he had been working so hard and he had moved up to the seclusion retreat, and he wasn't going back to the city now to teach the classes. This was it. And this tragedy of the temple burning down. And there were 4 or 5 of us looking at the embers. The temple burned down very, very quickly. And after we stood there all in a state of shock, barely saying anything except, of course, to console Swami, then he walked off and went back to his cabin. And he said later to us that he was absolutely numb. His heart was numb. And of course, this was something that he didn't want that. Who wants a numb heart? No one. And so he said to Divine Mother in prayer, he said, you know, I did this for you. I didn't do this for me. I did this for you. I built this temple and all of the buildings, the retreat, now the village, everything was for you. And as he shared from the depths of his heart, he found replacing this dumbness, this overwhelming bliss, such that he said, well, Divine Mother, if I knew there was going to be such joy in giving up the temple, you would have taken the dining room too. And so that became one of our favorite stories, and still is, that has been repeated many times. And in a way, gave us really, to the depths of our being, the feeling of the fruits of detachment. And in this reading of Yogananda, many people think that to be detached is to be aloof. And they have a total misunderstanding. Really, as we begin to pull away in a detached spirit from our own desires and from our own karma and this body and personality, all these things, what do we discover? We discover our own soul, which of course is joy and love. And so it was interesting for me when I first came, because of course I was very new, I was just a teenager. And so I was just asking so many questions nonstop about all of the various aspects of yoga and so forth. But one thing I found very curious is that a person came up to me, she was a guest, and actually a friend that I had many years ago from Los Angeles. She came up to the seclusion retreat to be on retreat. And after she left there with her mother, she said that she found the people cold. And I thought, gee, that hasn't been my experience at all. But I wanted to meditate on that. And I thought, I wonder if maybe someone that she encountered somehow didn't have the experience. Again, we were all new on staff, didn't have that experience of what it is to be detached, but not aloof, to be detached, but to be then an instrument for spirit. And I looked around and I thought, well, maybe she did have that experience, and I let it be. But on the spiritual path, it is fairly common. It certainly was my experience initially to have what Yogananda called spiritual indigestion, where we really don't understand that to be spiritual is to reclaim our own natural state, the natural state of the soul. And yes, we have to detach ourselves, but again, we're also human. And so it has to be done in a way that is, with common sense, with intuition. In the early years when I was a monk, I overdid it. And I would sit on my big, as it turned out, big orange beanbag pillow that I used for meditation. And I would just sit there. I wouldn't read books. I wouldn't do anything after meditation, waiting for the call to meditate again. And I found myself far from getting more relaxed and more joyful, thinking, this can't be right. But I didn't know any better, because at that point I had severed away too many things. In life, the spiritual life, many things are still fine. You could still read classical books and listen to classical music, things like that. All of these are wholesome activities. And I gave up everything because I, of course, thought, to be a yogi, I should follow the path, as I had read in the autobiography of a yogi, of Ram Gopal and Pranavananda, who would stay up all night long after his time working and meditate with a friend. But I wasn't ready for that. One time I went to Swami and I said to him, and this was a very important lesson for me. I said, Swami, I'm going for broke, meaning I'm giving everything. This was in the early 70s. Wonderful thing. That's what we are aspiring to do, to give everything to God, but it was premature for me. And what did he say? He said, only saints go for broke, which was to say that one step at a time, as Master talked about, slow and steady wins the race. And that was a very, very important lesson in order to understand the need for balance, the need for integration. And so over time, I discovered that detachment was very, very important. But again, I needed to go on this journey of detachment with, again, common sense, with intuition, with my own experience, with the experience of others, and especially tuning in to the lives of the gurus. And the thing that helped me the most was the thought that I had read of being amused and detached. Amused detachment, what did that speak of? It spoke of joy. So that if we're going to sever a particular desire or something like that, then it's done with joy. And we don't get ourselves into this state, which can happen to yogis and spiritual aspirants, where, again, as it happened to me, I was giving away too much, and there was seemingly nothing left. I had gone overboard with cutting away too much too soon. And so for us, as we, again, find ourselves in this world situation of enormous challenge, it's important to be detached, to allow God and the great ones to basically be in charge, which of course they are anyway, of the future of our lives, the future of the lives of all that live on this world. And to not be attached to concerns that we have perhaps blunders, mistakes that we've made in the future. Count your blessings, skip the rest. Remember the beautiful story of Master when there was this Orthodox Christian evangelist. It was a big crowd of people, and Master was there in attendance. And she said with a thunderous voice, everyone sit down, you're all sinners. And the crowd had been standing moments before. And Master was the only one left standing because he wasn't going to embrace the thought that he was a sinner. We're not that. We're children of God. So being detached, especially at this time, is very, very important. What are we detaching ourselves from? It's a big job. As Yogananda said, this project of self-realization. Bit by bit, we're detaching ourselves from being attached to this body. We're detaching ourselves from this little ego, the masquerading little Napoleon, as Yogananda described. We're detaching ourselves from all these strings of attachment that have been there perhaps for many, many lives, bit by bit. But it has to be done in such a way that is driven by joy. And so in that way, we know what is the appropriate thing now to work on giving up. And as Yogananda said, with Kriya Yoga, you have the key in your hand. And why is Kriya so very, very important? Well, Swami recently in a talk was talking about a bar magnet. And a bar magnet can be magnetized in two different ways. One is by the close proximity of another magnet that's already, of course, magnetized north-south. And the other is to introduce into the unmagnetized bar of steel electricity. And so in these two ways, that an unmagnetized bar of steel can be magnetized. And so Yogananda described for us that we too are magnets. And that by close proximity with the Guru, then we can be magnetized. That's one way. Just as the unmagnetized bar of steel can be magnetized by a magnetized bar. And the other way is by Kriya. That's the electricity that he spoke of. And so with Guru and with the power of Kriya, then we find ourselves automatically becoming more and more detached. Why is that? Because Kriya is wonderful but natural pranayama. Bit by bit, slow and steady wins the race, begins to release all of these obstructions. That's the key of Kriya, to release all of these obstructions found in the deep spine, in the deep sushumna, not the physical spine, of course, but the energy astral spine where desires and karmas are to be found. And bit by bit, these karmas are released. And we find ourselves just naturally becoming detached. Why? Because we have found something better. We are not going to release these habits and these desires until we have something better. And that's why joy is a solution. And that's why Swami Kriyananda talked about seeking God for joy first. God is joy, and joy is God, and we are that joy. And so with Kriya, and of course with Seva, with spiritual families, satsang, and many other things, we find ourselves naturally becoming detached, but in a way, and this is really the miracle of it, that we become more ourselves. Again, Yogananda didn't become more like his guru Sri Yukteswar, the Jnani. He became more and more himself, which was a bhakti. And so it is with us as we tune into our higher nature. We find that bit by bit, like a spring thaw, all of these things that have created disturbance in our mind, disturbance in our hearts, problems with our relationships with others, all of these things, they begin to fall away. Because the joy that begins to lubricate the very depths of our being and really filters out on a cellular level begins to show us the way, to show us how to behave, to redirect our thoughts so our thoughts are more refined, more exalted. And we find ourselves, even as we move about in this world, to move more graciously. We find ourselves in a state of deeper and deeper relaxation. And with this discovery of amused detachment, joyous detachment, we find far from being apathetic, far from being distanced from the miseries of this world. The fruit of joy is compassion. And so we find that we want to spend more time in prayer because we find that even as yogis, as spiritual aspirants, there's a tendency to order a little bit too much around our own selves. You know, are we going to be making enough money? And how about the hard times? How about our security? All of those things. We need to give everything to God. That's why Swami Kriyananda highly recommended. That's why it's lovely to start our satsang with a fire ceremony. He said at night, create in your own mind a bonfire, blue healing flames of spirit in the forehead of the spiritual eye, and offer into those flames all of our desires until we feel more and more this feeling of growing expanse in the heart, this feeling of growing love. And as we're able to do so, we find that the spiritual path really is becoming more fun. I often recall, and I find it so inspiring, that Swami Kriyananda, who was considered really by many the father of spiritual communities, he was at a big symposium up in Canada. Thousands of people were in attendance. And he was asked, what's the mission of Ananda? Well, he could have talked for a long time, sharing that. But what did he say so simply? It's to have fun. And fun is joy. And joy is fun. And so, especially during these times that are very, very challenging, because we don't know what's around the corner. When are we going to be out of lockup, which I like to call house arrest, and more positively seclusion? When are we going to be able to go back to our lives and to see our friends? All of those things we don't know. We don't know. And so we just have to be good sports and pray that bit by bit, whether it's tomorrow or in the hopefully near future, we then can go back to our lives, appreciating this time that we've been given. And we hope to use this time wisely, because really the positive aspect of this experience is seclusion. Many people that we've talked to, yogis, and again, those with an inner life especially, all I've heard, though again, everyone says that we miss being with one another. Certainly that's the case. But all that I've heard is that they've been able to deepen their meditations. They've been able to go deeper into reading of spiritual books and listening to spiritual music, all of these things. And this, of course, is all very positive and really life-changing. And so we find ourselves more and more far from being victims of spiritual indigestion, being able to appreciate Yes, we are divine. And at the same time, we're also human. And that's why Swami Kriyananda would say that even after many, many years after Master's passing in 52, he continues to meditate on even a gesture of Master's because he found that everything that the Master did had meaning, deep spiritual meaning. Some of the things he would meditate on for many years, and finally he would say, well, so that is what he meant by that glance. As Master said, I really prefer, he said, to teach through the eyes. He said, many here were saints from the past, and so he could teach in that subtle way. He said, when I have to teach by being, tough and so forth, he said, I just wilt inside because that's not where my heart's at. I just want to share in a loving way. Of course, he always did that, no matter whether he was being tough or not. But still, we know what he meant. He just wanted to share in subtle ways, such as when Swami Kriyananda sometimes was at lectures of Yogananda. He said often when Yogananda would be lecturing, he would be looking at him. Very interesting. And one particular time, it was so sweet. He answered a question that Swami had, that he hadn't voiced, that he had in his mind that was really perhaps even troubling him. And so when Yogananda shared from this lecture, this particular teaching, Swami Kriyananda said to him silently, thank you. And so in the middle of his lecture, Yogananda glanced and acknowledged that thought because as Swami Kriyananda and other disciples, of course, found again and again, as Yogananda said, phenomenal as it is, I know every single thought you're thinking. And so for us, with detachment comes this wonderful gift of being able to tune in to the great master, to Swami, to the great ones, in ways that perhaps in the beginning, as we first entered the spiritual path, we thought almost impossible. But more and more, we're able to feel that song within our own hearts as we are attuned to the Guru. And more, we're able, as we're serving, to feel that the Guru is serving through us. All the fruits of being detached with the right spirit. And so this is the perfect time with this tremendous international challenge to embrace this very, very important quality, but with joy, in a mature way, in a balanced way, in an integrated way, understanding that detachment is the quality that we want. Remove ourselves from this great swirling Maya. Remember, as it says in the Gita from Krishna, get away from my ocean of suffering and misery. We can do that. And yet be in this world and serve selflessly, joyously, with compassion, but bit by bit. Remove ourselves from all these things that trouble the mind and heart, and rather be more and more able and willing to be humble spirits for the divine. So, God bless you all, and we'll now have a song.
I Lord, in your presence I live without you.
And now let's please stand for the Aarti.
Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine.
And now we like to send out all of the blessings from the great ones as we act as their instruments, filling you with light, love, and joy.
Thank you all for coming. We just have a few announcements. The Change event is next Saturday and Sunday, and you're all pretty informed about that. Make sure you register this week. I think Thursday is the cutoff date. It's been quite remarkable, the participation of all the centers, especially at Bangalore. With our calling campaign, they now have hundreds of people that are registered. We've contacted literally, I think, thousands of people from all the centers on the phone. And it's been really an awakening in India for Master's work to spread. So thank you to everyone who has participated and contributed their time to this wonderful event that will bring many, many souls back to God. So we will see you next week at the event. And so don't forget to register. And then we have a couple classes. The satsang will not happen next week, and we won't have classes next week. We'll resume classes in our satsang the following week, which will be on the day of Swamiji's discipleship, the anniversary of his discipleship. So we'll celebrate that next Sunday, the Sunday after next Sunday. So God bless you all, and we keep you in our prayers. And one of these days we'll get to see you again. So if anyone